Is the second half defense here to stay from what we saw for KU UCF? And could KU actually afford to run the ball even more? We're going to get into our biggest takeaways from KU's win at UCF.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day, and thank you to the everydayers catching each and every episode of the show. We are free and available anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. And on today's edition of LOJ, we've got our biggest takeaways from KU taking down UCF on the road, 27-20. A close victory for KU nonetheless. We'll get to our goats of the game. Good, bad, and what's next for KU, which is probably going to be their hardest game of the season at Texas Tech. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, and you can get KU with like plus 13.5 right now for that game. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the FanDuel app today. So KU takes down UCF 27-20 on the road. You know, maybe you could come in here and talk about, the one-score games, the elixir was the UCF game, and it's going to be fixed, and KU is going to go on a run in one-score games now. Maybe, hopefully, that would certainly be, the case there. But I still think there were some things that, I don't know that you can count on each and every game. So I do think my biggest takeaway from the game, it has to involve the defense. I mean, anytime that you give up 0 points in the second half, you make a goal line stand, you make another stand at the end of the game. KU's defense came through when they needed them to in this game. And I don't even know from a big picture, I don't even know that I'm expecting the defense to look that good this week against Texas Tech, because I think Texas Tech is going to put up some points. It's a road game. Tech's got a good offense. They're just a very talented team overall. So, and I don't even know that there's going to be more struggles this season at different points. It could be a quarter, it could be a drive, it could be a game against some of the teams they're playing against. I'm not saying it's completely fixed and that every game it's going to be the second half against UCF or the West Virginia game or the Fresno State game. But I at least saw enough there to make me think that it's not going to be the Cincinnati game every game. That's not going to be the Missouri game every game. And I do think it's important to note when you have a young secondary, there are going to be moments that look good. There are going to be some moments that look bad. And I think that's kind of where I'm at with this defense. It's either going to be moments, and it could be a game, it could be a drive, it could be a quarter, where the defense is going to look like the worst of the Lance Leipold era, and then there's going to be moments where it looks like the best of the Lance Leipold era. And I think that's my takeaway from this game, that I do expect to see more highs from this defense, but I probably also expect to see some lows along the way as well. Going back to the in the secondary for this team, and I guess just the young players in general, KU actually ended up with a 79 coverage grade on Pro Football Focus. So really good coverage grade there. So you see some of the highs, and maybe you could point to and say, okay, the fact that you did that here is did a switch flip for the secondary. And if you can get that secondary playing well, you feel pretty good about the front seven. Maybe this defense can take that next step. I guess where I'm at is the young guys are going to improve as the season goes on. That typically is how things work. And there should be more of these types of moments where the KU defense does look good, but I'm also not ready to completely get to a point of saying, this is going to be the defense the rest of the way. But that's at least a better place to be at, of being okay, there could be a bit of a roller coaster, than it is of just being no, the Cincinnati game is going to be how it is the rest of the season. They're just not going to stop anybody. Not necessarily the case there. Number 2 takeaway here is third downs are still an issue, but the fact that Kansas performed well in the red zone, both offensively and defensively, gives me hope that the third downs can still be figured out. So we've talked a lot about the Kansas, for whatever reason, the third downs have not come together so far this season for KU. 3 of 11 on third downs in this game. So it didn't really get much better against UCF. And KU came into this game 14th in the Big 12 in third down conversion rate. This is after, they were first in the Big 12 last year. They've been around 49, 50, 51% each of the last 3 seasons. So they've really been an excellent third down conversion offense over the last 3 years coming into this one. And you still have the same quarterback with Jalon Daniels. You still have, a similar coaching brass to where you were. And even last year when it was Jeff Grimes, for as much as, things weren't simpatico for a lot of it with Grimes, you still found a way to be a good third down conversion offense. I look to, I guess, the idea that you only had a 7th percentile success rate on third downs to say that this was still a problem for KU in this game. But something else that was a problem coming into this one was red zone. Red zone offensively, red zone defensively. Kansas came into this game in the red zone as the last place team in the Big 12 in terms of the percentage of their red zone drives that led to points. They also were one of just 4 teams in the Big 12 coming into this one that had given up scores on 100% of opponent red zone trips against their defense. So you were looking at Kansas having troubles in the red zone. And, I think more so with the third downs, because we have past history to point to say, no, Kansas has been a good third down team, combined with the fact that Kansas isn't getting in a lot of third and longs compared to, the national average, makes me think that, okay, the Kansas, there's enough there to think that the third downs, there's going to be a game or two where it comes back around to Kansas's way. And the red zone stuff, that hasn't been as good in some of the past couple seasons for Kansas on both ends of the field as maybe, the third down stuff. But that turned in this game, which does give me hope that something that is showing more hints that should be better, the third down. If the red zone can get better, why can't the third down get better? Kansas had an 82nd percentile red zone success rate on Saturday, so very good in the red zone, even though they ended up having to kick 2 field goals in the end. They actually were really productive overall in the red zone. And then the defense in the red zone. Again, Kansas opponents had scored on 100% of red zone drives against them coming into this game. Kansas got a pretty big one without giving up points on that goal line stand against UCF. So picked a good time for that to come through. All right, number 3 takeaway here. I actually want more running game. And it's funny because it was very balanced in this game. Jalen's been very good this year too. You look at QBR, you look at Pro Football Focus, you look at, just a lot of different ways you can judge quarterbacks now. And Jalon Daniels has had a very good start to the season for KU. This is not me saying to, I guess, they need to run more to protect him or whatever. No, I just think Kansas needs to run the ball more from a perspective of, it feels like they're at times getting too pass happy. It feels like certain drives, it's okay, we're going to run it a bunch. And then other drives, it's we're not going to run it at all. Maybe that just keeps the defense on its toes. But I feel like there's more meat on the bone for the running game for KU. I also think it would definitely help the defense, right? You keep them off the field and allow them to get rested. And this is something that I find very interesting. This wasn't the most explosive game. In fact, KU didn't really hit any explosives in the running game. But UCF was 0th percentile on Saturday. So they were the worst team on Saturday in run stuff rate, meaning they were not stuffing the Kansas run. Kansas run was getting, maybe it was only 2, 3, 4 yards at a time, but they were at least keeping you kind of on schedule. They were keeping you moving forward. They weren't able to just get those stuffs. And Leshon Williams has I know some of the totals aren't necessarily jumping off the page because he's only getting 12 or so carries per game. And maybe part of this too is that Daniel Highshaw's been hurt. And so ideally you were thinking, hey, Highshaw's going to get 10, 12, 15 carries a game. Leshon will get 10, 12, 15 carries a game. We can kind of split it up that way. And by not having Highshaw, it's hard to not have another workhorse back. But 50 carries, 303 yards for Leshon Williams so far. So he's averaging a little over 6 yards per carry. That is a very efficient number there. And it's kind of well, could you afford to give him 15 carries in a game? Could you afford to give him 18 carries, maybe even 20 carries in a game? Very efficient. I thought Harry Stewart looked really good for KU. Could he have done with more than a handful of carries? Could he have been better, having 8 to 10 carries in this game? And I look at EPA per play. Leshon Williams averaged 0.3 EPA per play for Kansas' win against UCF. You might be thinking, what is that number? Is that any good? Cam Scadaboo at Arizona State last year averaged 0.24 EPA per play, which is very good. And Leshon Williams in the game against UCF was above that. Probably should have gotten more than 12 carries. Heck, even Isaiah Marshall looked good in the running game. I think this would help Jalon Daniels. I think it would help the defense. Right now, Kansas is at more runs per game than they are throws per game. So you might look at the overall stats and say, what do you mean they need to run more? But that's a little misleading because in KU's games against Wagner and Fresno, where you're just blowing them out, you're going to run more late. 82 runs compared to 54 passes. In the 4 Power 4 games Kansas has played, 110 passes versus 119 runs. So that's closer to even. But again, that doesn't do it justice either because Kansas slaughtered West Virginia and you're able to run all fourth quarter. If we just look at the close games against, FBS opponents or Power 4 opponents, Missouri, Cincinnati, UCF. Kansas has 84 passes in those games compared to 78 runs. So they're throwing more than they run it. I think KU could afford to be a 45% pass, 55% run team. But I also don't want this to be mistaken about aggression because I thought like on the 3rd and 15 on the first drive of the game, I thought they should have passed there. I thought on the 3rd and 4 at the end of the game, they should have passed there. But I think overall, I think Kansas could establish the run even more than they already are. I do think there's a little bit more meat on the bone there. And I think Leshon Williams has been pretty underrated, that I would be fine with him getting 15, 20 carries in a game. All right, let's get to our GOATs of the game, good and bad. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by Peloton, is shaping the future of fitness with the brand new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus, powered by Peloton IQ. It's their most advanced equipment yet, designed to give you real-time guidance and endless ways to move, whether you're running, lifting, cross-training with your favorite instructors. This is training reimagined. Peloton is built for breakthroughs with tools that help you plan, stay motivated, and reach peak performance. You can take different classes. You can find instructors that you like and just keep going with theirs. You can go back into the archive and find their old classes, but they'll feel like new if you haven't seen them before. So let yourself run, lift, flex, and push forward. Explore the new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus today at onepeloton.com. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page. Give me a follow at D Johnson Radio or our show account at LO_Jayhawks on Twitter. All right, goats of the game. Good goats, bad goats. Let's start with the good for KU here. It is Jalon Daniels, 18 of 26, 235 yards, 25 rushing yards. I thought he had some really impressive throws. Obviously, you think back to the missed 4th down throw, but from there, I don't know, he was throwing guys open at different points. And really impressive. Like we talked a lot in the offseason. KU didn't exploit the middle of the field enough last season, especially compared to what they were doing with Andy Kotelnicki. Well, Jalon Daniels in this game against UCF, 10 of 12 over the middle third of the field. He was also really good throwing the ball downfield. I mean, typically, if you're completing like 40% of your balls, 10 or yards beyond downfield, like you're going to have a good amount of success, 40, 50%. He was 6 of 10 on 10 plus yards downfield. And then also when he was blitzed, absolute money, 7 of 9 for 127 yards against the blitz against UCF. So really impressive performance for Jalon Daniels. I think he had like a 90 PFF grade too, which is pretty impressive. Leshon Williams, 12 carries for 58 yards and 3 touchdowns. Again, 0.3 EPA per play, which is above what Cam Scadaboo was averaging a season ago for Arizona State when he was one of the best players in the country. He was really efficient, had a really good game for KU. Cam Pickett, 5 catches for 64 yards. He obviously had the one that he kind of bobbles and catches on the deep seam route. What's amazing, would you believe me if I told you Cam Pickett only played 21 snaps, which is like not a huge number. He's probably still, nursing that injury that he's coming back from. That's pretty wild that he played 21 snaps and had 5 catches for 64 yards. I mean, talk about efficiency there. Pass blocking gets a good goat here for KU. Just 1 sack allowed. They limited the pressures against a UCF front that came in with some really good defensive ends. And it was really everybody in the pass blocking game. Bryce Foster had an 82 pass block grade on Pro Football Focus. Kobe Baines had an 85 pass block grade on Pro Football Focus. Enrique Cruz had an 82. Tuiko Lovato, Nolan Gorsica, Amir Herring, Harry Stewart, even as a running back. Obviously, that's more limited snaps, but those guys all had pass block grades above a 74 for KU. Even Calvin Clemens, who one gripe that I do have with Pro Football Focus, there's a couple, but it's at least take it with a grain of salt. One of my gripes is that it's not adjusted for your opponent. So, like for instance, in this game, so Calvin Clemens actually had his season high in pass blocking grade, 68.3, which is actually, real quick side note, Calvin Clemens now back-to-back weeks has set his new season high in pass blocking grade on Pro Football Focus. we've talked about that we think he's going to be a good player, and he might be turning that corner right now. He might be turning that corner. He's always been solid run blocking. He might be turning that corner to, really figuring out from a pass blocking perspective, which is going to be money if that can be the case for KU. But one of the things that Clements there, so you see Clements, 68.3 pass block grade, like that's very solid game for Calvin Clements. But I don't think it does it enough justice, because you see Foster at 82 and Baines at 85 and Cruz at 82, and you're like, okay, but those guys were the guys leading the way. Okay, Calvin Clements is playing a lot of snaps against some of those stud UCF defensive ends. And that's a more challenging matchup than if you're the guard playing one of the UCF defensive tackles, who maybe isn't quite as good of a pass rusher as those UCF defensive ends with Kelly and Lawrence, who came in with a combined 21 pressures on the season. And so I wish there was like opponent adjusted, because if you get an 80 grade, but you're going up against a 60 defensive tackle, so to speak, but versus a guy who gets a 70 grade, but he's going up against 75 defensive end, the 70 grade is actually more impressive. So like in a way, Calvin Clements, if you're grading on a curve, which you should based on the opponent, that's even more impressive for what Clements did. It's a really good pass blocking game for KU. Defensively, Justice Finkley had a 76 Pro Football Focus grade. I noticed him in the game making some key stops, helping in run defense. 87 run defense, that makes sense. He also had a pressure for KU. He's kind of been on a tear lately too, so he's really trending in the right direction. Lyric Rawls, we talked about, he'd had a great start to the season, didn't have a very good game against Cincinnati. How would he bounce back? He did bounce back. He had a 75 PFF grade, 71.5 in coverage, and how about this? 6 tackles against UCF. 0 missed tackles against the Knights. Keenan Caldwell, in a game where Tommy Dunn had a few moments, flashed a few times, DJ Withers didn't have one of his better games, Keenan Caldwell ended up playing a lot of snaps and had a really good game. And he had a 74 PFF grade and 36 snaps, higher snap count for him. I wonder if that was one of the adjustments too that Kansas made, and being like, hey, he's having a good game against the run against UCF and we're struggling to stop it. He's going to come in and help plug it up, and he certainly did. Trey Lathan led KU in tackles. He also had a 72 PFF grade. Another good game for him. Blake Harold had a 71.5. He certainly was the apple of the eye of the broadcast a few times and had a few flash plays, and he certainly deserves a good goat here as well. Bengali Kamara for coming back in the second half, and obviously had a big impact in where KU was, but also being used a little bit in that like JB Brown role of the linebacker who's going to rush the passer and even at times like come around the edge. He had 3 pressures, which led KU. And I find that very interesting if that's going to be something they're going to use even more moving forward. But it's interesting. Like you look at his Pro Football Focus grade, it wasn't like a huge grade. The reason why he missed 3 tackles, and I'm starting to formulate a theory here, because if you go back to there's some other games that Bengali Kamara has played where his PFF grade has been in the 60s, which again, 60s is fine on PFF. But it doesn't necessarily feel like sometimes when you're watching Bengali Kamara, you're thinking like, oh, this dude's a stud. And then you see the PFF grade and it's like, okay, it's more so saying he's, kind of like average starter. And I don't think that's the case. And my theory here is that Kamara is so athletic and so good at getting to where say you hand it off to the running back. It feels like Bengali Kamara is shot out of a cannon. He hits the guy a yard behind the line of scrimmage, and then maybe he misses the tackle. And that's where you're getting dinged, because your tackling grade ends up not being very good and it tanks your PFF grade. But in reality, by just getting there so fast and knowing where the play was and at least hitting him, it's slowing him down and allowing other players to make the tackle, after the running back only gains 1 yard or 0 yards or 2 yards, as opposed to if you never made that play to begin with, maybe he's picking up 4 or 5 yards. And I don't think he's getting enough credit for that from Pro Football Focus, because that's just not part of the grading system for them. So when you see some of the PFF grades for Bengali Kamara, just know they're probably lower than the actual impact that he's having. And I think that's a good reason. So I'm going to give him a good goat here. And then the Dye brothers, 68.5 PFF grade for Jalen, 79 for Devin, and that was a combined 56 snaps. You've had to deal with some injuries. Obviously, Devin got injured to the safety position, and both those guys really stepped up. All right, bad goats for KU, the early tackling. The tackling in the first half was a slog for KU, and it wasn't just the missed tackles, it was the bad angles on tackles. Both of those will kill you. That was not great. Got much better in the second half. Run blocking, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't put this as a bad goat, because I don't think it was a bad game for the KU run blocking, but it wasn't a good one either. You had a mid-50s team grade on Pro Football Focus. You were under 2 yards per offensive line run push. Most of the yards you got were from the runners themselves. But it wasn't a disaster game either. UCF didn't get a bunch of tackles for loss or many stuffs either. So it's just you were consistently moving them a yard off the ball. and then trying to have your running backs just kind of take care of it from there. Offense on third down, we talked about that earlier, just 3 of 11. Dumb penalties, we talked about that on the recap show. Check that out if you haven't already. And some of the dumb things that you did on penalties that nearly cost you that game. But that's something you have to clean up moving forward. Fortunately for KU, didn't cost them in the end. The backed up offense, I don't love. I don't know. Like, is running the QB sneak on 1st and 10 from your own 1-yard line, is that a waste of a play? I know you're trying to get yourself more space to work with, but is snapping the ball from your 3 versus snapping the ball from your 1, is it really giving you that much more space to work with, or is it just kind of a wasted play? So I don't love that. I also would have liked to see him throw on 3rd and 4 because, again, if UCF gets the ball back with 1:30 with 1 timeout versus 1:30 with no timeouts, it's a very similar situation either way. In fact, like, the reason UCF didn't score at the end, it wasn't because of lack of clock. It was just because they couldn't convert on the 4 downs. So I would have liked to see them, give it to your 6-year quarterback there and throw it there. The Devin Dye injury, that sucked. He led KU's defense in PFF grade, so that was unfortunate. The whole play, right? You get a dropped interception and you get hurt, and that'll be the play people remember for you when you had the best PFF grade on the team. Like, that sucks. And then the other linebackers besides Bengali Kamara and Trey Lathan really struggled, and I think that's part of, too, why Kamara had such a big impact coming into the game. Like, the grades for the other linebackers with Brantley and Kamara and stuff, like, guys that I'm high on and I think are going to have very bright futures at KU, but in this specific game, wasn't necessarily the best performance there. But it's a good thing Kamara was available in the second half. That's for sure. All right, let's take an early look ahead at our next opponent, the Texas Tech Red Raiders. And today's episode of Locked On Jayhawks is brought to you by Square. Your favorite neighborhood spots run on a Square. There's certain businesses that make the neighborhood the neighborhood. These are the places that become an extension of the home, whether it's a sports bar dedicated to your team's fan base, the spot with the best wings in town for game day, or that beloved local chain that's been rooted in the community for years. These businesses are what bring people together. When neighborhood businesses thrive, the whole neighborhood thrives. I think of Silas and Maddie's. I'm a huge ice cream guy. Love taking my daughter to get ice cream every now and then. Got so many great flavors. Please let me pick an ice cream. No, but in all reality, like, Silas and Maddie's goated in Lawrence, obviously on Mass, and they use Square. Square is a proud partner of more than 4 million neighborhood businesses around the world. You can go to square.com/go/lockedoncollege to learn more. But before you do, go support your favorite neighborhood spot. You'll be happy you did. Square, see you in the neighborhood. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The NFL season's here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. And you can bet on the KU Texas Tech game. You can pick the over-under. You can make yourself a same-game parlay. You can pick a player prop. KU's getting just under 2 touchdowns right now on the spread against Texas Tech. So if you think they can keep it close, which a lot of teams have been able to against Texas Tech, that is the case. You can do that over at FanDuel. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. So KU's next opponent is the Texas Tech Red Raiders. This kind of grinds my gears, this stat that we're going to talk to about KU's schedule just happening to, I swear, man, KU could, it's like, I think back to when, like, Coastal Carolina was, like, at their peak. Like, now Coastal Carolina is, like, not very good. And, like, before Grayson McCall, like, they weren't very good. They were just, like, coming up from I think the FCS level. And it was like, of course, when KU plays them, they're really good. It's like, I remember KU's playing like Ohio in the mid-2010s. It's like, of course, when they're, well, I guess Ohio's typically been pretty good in the MAC, but, like, it just feels like every team that KU plays on the schedule, they're, like, always playing them when they're, like, at their peak. Missouri's having a really good year this year. And so anyway, this is where that stat comes from. I forget who had it, so I apologize, but it was, there are 2 teams in, I forget if it was Power 4 or all of college football. Let's just say Power 4, but, who have out-yarded their opponent every week by at least 100 yards. So they've been plus 100 in yards or better each and every week. Missouri and Texas Tech. You already played Missouri, now you have to play Texas Tech. Just stupid. I don't love that. And I think as part of that stat, it was saying that Texas Tech is the only one to have it be 200-plus yards every game. So, like, legitimately, this isn't just the most talented and best team in the Big 12. this is one of the best teams in the country, one of the 10 best teams in the country. It really is. And it's a tough place to play, going to be on the road. So, this is not going to be an easy one, obviously, for KU. But they're 5-0 on the season coming into this one. They are third in the country in yards per play. They are fifth in the country in success rate, seventh in the country in EPA per play. The defense, though, you think of Texas Tech throwing it around the yard, and they can certainly do that. They have got a running game, though, too. But the defense, honestly, to me, is what's maybe the most scary or most impressive. They paid a lot of money in the portal to load up on their defensive line, and it has delivered. It has been worth every penny for them. Like, that defensive line is studly for Texas Tech. You look at it right now, they are number one in the country against the run EPA per play. They're also number 34 in the country against the pass EPA per play. That does mean, though, going back to our idea that like establishing the run for KU, this might not be the game to do it. You might actually be needing to throw it around a little bit more there. But yeah, they can definitely throw it around on their own, throwing the football. They've got three different players offensively who have 200 plus rushing yards and a fourth who has 169 with the backup quarterback, Will Hammond. Baron Morton and Hammond are both good quarterback options. This is a really explosive team. It's the most talented team in the Big 12. Really good portal additions. KU is going to have to play their A-plus game. If they want to go in on the road and win this game, they're going to have to play their A-plus game, right? And you might have to play your A game to make it a close game if you want to keep this one. Because the way the Texas Tech is rolling right now, they beat Arkansas Peanut Butter and Jelly, UAPB, 67-7. They beat Kent State 62-14. They beat Oregon State 45-14. Now, none of those are great opponents. They won at Utah, which, I still don't really know like just how good is Utah, but still that's a tough place to play, 34-10. And they won at Houston, which I think very highly of Willie Fritz, and I think Houston's a solid team this year, 35-11. Like, they've not been stressed so far this year. This is going to be a good litmus test for KU as well. What if Cincinnati keeps rolling? What if Missouri keeps rolling? What if Kansas loses this game close? Then we're going to be sitting there going, oh, at that point you're 4-3, but it's like, this is a pretty good 4-3 football team, right? But I don't know. This is also an opportunity where it's like, if you're Kansas, if you win this game on the road, from a national perspective, you're going to start getting real attention. But very interesting game, very good opponent. I have a lot of respect for what they're doing right now in Lubbock. So we'll be breaking that game down plenty more throughout the week here with Locked On Jayhawks. We'll have some more KU basketball recruiting content coming at you on tomorrow's episode. Make sure you're subscribed to the show, hit the like button on YouTube, and we'll see you next time for another edition of Locked On Jayhawks.